Hello there, this is Daniele from Toolchefs and welcome to this new video. Today we're going to explore the rendering workflow in Atoms, and to do this we're going to talk about everything that you need to know from A to B to render your agents. So we're going to talk about some of the key concepts of Atoms, like what is a variation. We're going to also run through an installer to understand how you can install the right procedure for your render engine. We're going to talk about some of the tools like the variation builder, the variation manager. And even though you might already be familiar with Atoms, I would still recommend to check this video because you might still learn something new. So as first thing, I prepared this slide to talk about the difference between an agent type and a variation. So as you know, before you can even start simulating in Atoms, you'll need an agent type. An agent type is just a collection of a few things like a skeleton, a skin mesh if you want, also ragdoll setup, and so on. So by default, you at least need a skeleton, okay? And on the top of the slide here, we see that we have a skeleton and also the skin mesh for that agent type. So whenever you whenever you start laying out your agent, whenever you are building your simulation, using the skin mesh is a good workflow because you're gonna speed up performances as Atoms has to render less meshes. You can still see the variations that are the mesh, like the characters that we see at the bottom here. A variation is just a combination of meshes and materials that can be associated to an agent of a specific agent type. So in this case here we have prepared these variations that are can be given to an agent that is of man agent type, which is this case here. So this is the man agent type that we ship with Atoms and also in the Atoms agents. In your setup, you might have different agent types. You could have like different men, and that will depend on if they have a different skeleton. If they have the same skeleton, I would recommend always using the same agent type and then just changing the variation meshes. But then you could also have, like a woman, a boy, a cat, dog, or a dragon, or whatever, really any kind of character. And then you would have, like, again, a skin mesh for that skeleton, for that agent type, and then you can have any kind of variation for that agent type. Once you have basically these meshes, you can export them in a what we call a variation table. So it's just a collection of a few files, so a variation JSON, but also some other files like the geometry files, the material files, the cloth setup files, and so on. So these are usually exported on disk, and then you can reload them in Atoms and check the content of this variation table with the variation manager, which is another tool that we're gonna check later. Usually you wouldn't play with these files manually. You will always use maybe Python or maybe our APIs or the variation manager to play with these files. The first thing that we want to do right is to install the right procedural for your render engine. So here I've already downloaded the installer from the website. Of course, you need to download the installer for your specific Houdini version that you want to use. Then you can accept the terms of agreement, just select a destination path. Here there's just one Houdini version, which is the one that we downloaded the installer for. If you're using Linux, you could just go on the documentation and you'll find all the information that you need for configuring Atoms Houdini for your Houdini. Here on this page we see all the basically render engine that are supported for this version of Houdini. So in this case we support both Arnold, Renderman, and V-Ray. So basically, yeah, if you enable these in the Houdini package that this installer is going to create, all of these are going to be configured. So here you can click next. Usually we support one Arnold version. So in this case, it matches if you check the release notes, the latest of H2A. So if we go back, we see it's the same version, so that's fine. Here Renderman and also V-Ray. Click next, and make sure also to keep this option enabled, so that basically the installer will create the Atoms Houdini JSON and install it in your documents folder. So I'm just gonna run the installer. Cool, so this is done now. If we go in the documents folder, so here I'm just in my documents folder, then Houdini 19.5, we'll find the packages folder, and inside it we'll see that we have an Atoms Houdini file. So here we can see that we have the RenderMan being set up, V-Ray, and also Arnold. And also all the other paths are being enabled, are being set up for this Atoms Houdini version. Before we export the variations, there are two things that you must be aware of. So the first one is that the skeleton that we use in this scene, so the one for the variation geometries, must be the same skeleton that you use for your agent type. This is because, of course, we are going to skin these geometries, the variation geometries, later on the agent type skeleton. So if the two skeletons don't match, you're gonna most likely end up with weird deformations, both at the preview time, so in Houdini, directly in the Houdini viewport, but also render time. So this is quite important, and this is also a limitation that applies to Maya. So even if you just do everything in Maya or with any hybrid workflow, so between Maya and Houdini. The second limitation is that Atom supports only 3 skin weights per vertex for each geometry when previewing the geometries in the Houdini viewport. But at render time, this limitation is not valid. So basically, this means that all the geometries will be rendered correctly, even if you have more than 3 skin weights per vertex. So basically, if you have more than 3 skin weights, you might see weird deformations in the viewport. A good practice, if you see any weird deformation, would be to do a quick render just to see if that also happens at render time, because if that doesn't happen, it basically means that you are experiencing this limitation. And if it's not a problem for you, you can just keep working with your workflow. Otherwise, you'll have to go back to skinning and then making sure that each vertex has just 3 skin weights. Okay, so once you know this, you can start preparing your variations. There are a few ways in which you can handle your variations. You can either export them from other softwares like Maya and then import them in Houdini. Otherwise, you can even export them directly from Houdini. Here you'll have to prepare a scene. This scene will need to, if you're using Arnold, your geometries will need to have Arnold materials. Then you can create takes, and each take will have the geometries that will need to be included for a variation. So each take is going to be matched to a variation. And for those geometries, you need to set the display and T-display to basically to on. So once you have the takes, then you can use the variation builder. And then from here, of course, you need to select your renderer, and of course, this renderer must match the the materials that you have prepared for your geometries. Here you will provide an agent type name, and of course, you'll have to define this one when you're defining your CRUD workflow, because this is the same agent type name that you're going to use later when defining your agent type. Here we can select a destination variation file, a skeleton file. So going back to having the same skeleton for the agent type and the variations, usually this skeleton file comes from the agent type. So when you exported your agent types previously, so again, just make sure that the two match. Here we need to select the root like this. I've selected Arnold. Here we'll find the list of takes, so the list of geometries, and then you can select the file format, so you can even export to USD if you want, but I'm gonna just export to Geos. Gonna click run. So now the geometries have been exported, sorry, the variations have been exported on disk. So we'll find this variation JSON that we're gonna open later with Variation Manager. This preview folder, which will contain any preview file if the materials can be baked, but this is not the case. So for materials, then we are gonna have as files for Arnold. So your Arnold materials should be converted to either as files for Arnold, rib for RenderMan, RS for Redshift, and VRScene for V-Ray. Then we have here the geometries. and in this case the the fur and cloth will be empty. So if we open these, so let's import it. Let's import the variation that we just exported in this scene. We can open the variation manager, and with this tool we can actually see, the variations that we exported. So we see the geometries, their path, the materials. Here we also have a section for the preview. With Houdini, the variation builder doesn't export much information for the preview, so you will see most likely like either gray geometries or usually it's gray. But you can come here and if you know either Python or if you want to do it manually, you can even provide some diffuse textures, specular and normal maps, and so basically you will have a better preview in the viewport. Then we have here the variation, so this is the combination of the geometries with the materials. Later we're gonna see the overrides and tree, which are new features that we provide, that we implemented in Atom 6. In Houdini, we have another way for exporting the variations. I'm just gonna mention it quickly because we have already another video that covers this workflow. So this is the video importing Houdini crowds into other softwares. You can check it on YouTube. And this video shows how you can convert your Houdini crowds into Atom's caches, but also how you can export your variations. So if we go here under Tools, you will find this Houdini crowd variation exporter. Here you'll just need to provide a variation JSON path. You need to select your Houdini crowd and then you can click Export. And this will create the same files that we just saw on disk. And these files can be reused in Maya, in Unreal. So this tool opens up like a lot of possibilities for Houdini artists to share their crowds with other departments into other softwares too. Now we can have a look also at the variation tree and variation overrides. Once again, I'm just gonna mention this feature quickly because they're very important, but we have other videos on YouTube explaining the entire workflow, so that basically I would recommend checking those if you're interested to know more about this subject. So I've just imported some variations that I've previously exported. Here we have the geometries for our agent type, materials. Here are the pre-defined, so the pre-baked, let's say, variations within this variation JSON. Here we find all the geometries and materials associated with those geometries, and as you can see here, the look of the agent type change, the agent change for each variation. Then you have overrides. With overrides, you can add geometry and filter out geometry by specifying, like you can say maybe with. Actually, let's do without hair, something like this. Then you can filter them, and then you can provide a geometry. You can say hair like this, and then once you apply this filter, all the every agent having the hair 01_geo geometry will have them. Will have this geometry filtered out, so you won't see them. We won't see that in the viewport, but also render time. So this is how you use the overrides. With overrides, again, you can even add geometry, so it's not just filtering out geometry, so it's both. Then you can, with the tree, you can create variation types. Here you can start adding geometry. So for instance, we can say I want a body. Then we can create even extra geometry. So this one is like work like similarly to the variation builder that we have in Maya. Then here we have, you can add like hair if you want them. You can add, for instance, so there we have the body, you can add the shoes, trousers, and t-shirt, something like this. Now if you go in the preview, sorry, I'm missing the rules for associating the materials. So if now we go in the preview, we see that now we have some some variations. What's happening here is that the variation type is used for generating variations at runtime. You will get all these geometries, try to find a material from the available materials using the rules that you provide here in these options tab. and then it will associate these materials that we'll find to geometries. Here you can provide weights for your geometry, for your geometries, but also you can also add material overrides and so on. So it's a very flexible workflow. You can create multiple variation type if you want, and then you can assign the variation type directly in the Maya viewport. Okay, so now we can continue and create a simulation. I'm gonna actually use the same variations that we just edited in the previous section of this video. So we have also the override and a variation type. I exported them by using the variations export variation JSON. So once you edit the variations in the variation manager and you registered in the scene, they don't actually get saved directly on disk again. They get saved on this atoms node here as a JSON string. If you want to save this stuff out, you can either use atoms variations export variation JSON, or even in the variation manager you can use the where is it, save to disk here. Okay, great. So let me create an agent group now. We can create a grid layout and just quickly a state machine. We don't care about the sim really, we just want to render something quickly. So we're gonna go and change the size of the grid to 3 by 3. Here we're going to let's use the skin mode. We can use as first thing the variation randomizer. So the variation randomizer reads the content of the variation JSON that we have in this scene, shows you all the agent type and their variations. You can either select them all or even just one if you want. You can even remove variations from this side if you don't want to apply them. Also, the variation override is clever enough to check that the agent type that you have here in the tree is the same basically type of the agent where you're applying the variation. So in case, let's say here we had a woman agent type, in this case no variation would be applied to that agent because we don't have a woman agent type here, we just have man. So once you click run, the variations get assigned to the agents with the variation module. You see that now the variation module is here, and each variation is assigned as an override. So by opening the override dialog, you can see that. You can change the display type to variation, so we see the variations. Here you could, if you wanted, even select an agent and select the variation type variation just to use the the variation tree. You can change the seed if you want. The seed just works of course for the variation tree because all the other variations are static, so we can't really randomize them. In the video that I was mentioning earlier about the new variation workflow, you will find the explanation about the geometry override, material override, and geometry filter, so I'm not going to cover it here. Here we can also assign the variation override, as you see here, because our override here was filtering out the hair. Now no agent has hair, so this is something that you can do also. So let me just revert back to a variation there. So a static variation, so we're not going to really use the variation tree for rendering now. I'm going to clear the agent selection. So once you're ready to render, once you have your simulation with all the variations applied, you can cache out the simulation with the cache exporter. So I'm gonna create here a new folder called cache, and then I'm just gonna cache out 20 frames because I don't need more. That's done. Let's go to the first frame. I'm gonna hide this agent group because I don't need it anymore. Then we provide here in the rendering submenu procedures for all the render engines. So because we're going to render with Arnold at the moment, we're just gonna select Arnold there. I'm gonna select the cache. So you need to select the agent, the file without padding. Then here the variations. So this is the variation file that I used earlier. I'm gonna click create, and then in Atoms here I'm gonna use the variation. So we see that we have still the variations. Let's create a camera. Then we can create a plane. Actually, let me create first a sky dome. Save it there like this, and let me create also a plane like this and then we can maybe make it very big. Great. So I think, let me check if the rope was created. Yeah, we have the rope. We can select the camera. Yeah, okay, cool. It's already selected. So now we go in the render view. We click render. You see, we now have the agents. So what's happening here is that Arnold is finding our proxy, is then loading our procedural, and we pass all the information that you set on the proxy to the procedural, so then you can render your agents in Arnold. So in this video we covered quite a few things about the variation workflow. Please feel free to reach out in case you have more questions. But I hope this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.